The drastic change from the first Soviet period, 1928-9, to the second Yan'an period, 1935-45, was naturally questioned by many communists. When some in his Red Army called the merger with the Chang Regular Army counter-revolutionary, Mao replied that they were dogmatists. This political struggle underlies the period of Mao's alleged original contribution to the philosophy of Marxism. Objective research has since cast considerable doubt as to the date 1937 when the essays On Practice and On Contradiction were written. They weren't published until 1950-52. We, however, are willing to accept the official date for their writing at face value because they are objectively, subjectively, for yesteryear and for today, so very Maoist that it does not matter that Mao may have backdated them to make them appear prescient or rewritten them to suit his present style. The point is, in order to sell the policy of class collaboration, Mao evidently thought a frontal attack on the dogmatists would be insufficient, hence he chose the form of philosophic essays. These are so filled with empty abstractions that it is difficult to discover either his subject or his aim. In On Practice, Mao writes, begin quote, "The epistemology of dialectical materialism regards human knowledge as being at no point separable from practice." End quote. If knowledge is at no point separable from practice, he would have done well to tell us what practice he is talking about. But no. Mao is anxious to make this reduction of theory to practicality, and appears to be based on nothing less authoritative than Lenin's philosophic notebooks. Mao quotes Lenin's sentence, "Practice is more than cognition, theoretical knowledge." He fails to tell us, however, that Lenin was only restating Hegel's analysis of his relationship of the practical idea to the theoretical idea before the two are united, as Lenin puts it, precisely in the theory of knowledge. Far from being reduced to practicality, Lenin asserts in the very section from which Mao quoted one sentence the following. Begin quote, "Alias, man's consciousness not only reflects the objective world, but creates it." End quote. Since this preceded the quotation Mao had used, it would have seemed impossible for even a Confucian like Mao so totally to have misunderstood its meaning, unless of course he had set out deliberately to pervert Lenin. In any case, the world the sophist Mao created was for such a low purpose, to compel obedience to a new united front with Chang, that one hesitates to dignify the writing as philosophy. Only because the state capitalist tyrant rules over no less than 650 million souls is one compelled to attempt an analysis of his original contribution to Marxism. Evidently, Mao failed to convince his hearers or his readers, we are not told which, because he soon followed with still another philosophical essay, once again directed against the dogmatists and this time called On Contradiction. We are told it was delivered as a lecture at the Anti-Japanese Military and Political College in Yan'an, August 1937. In On Contradiction, Mao used some practical examples. This is at least one virtue. It shows exactly how he has to rewrite his own previous period of rule in order to balance the mistakes of dogmatists against those of the Kuomintang. It turns out that only, begin quote, after 1927 the Kuomintang turned in the opposite direction, end quote, from the revolutionary and vigorous period of United Front in 1925. The defeat of the Chinese Revolution is now laid at the door of Chan-Tu-Shuism, that is to say the revolutionary Trotskyist leader, Chan-Tu-Shu. Even the loss of Soviet China, now called merely the revolutionary bases, is blamed, not on Chang's extermination campaigns, but on the mistakes of adventurism. Since 1935, Mao pompously continues amidst a great deal of pretentious phrase-mongering on the philosophic meaning of contradictions, it, the Communist Party, has rectified these mistakes and led the new anti-Japanese United Front. It follows that after the Xi'an incident in December 1936, it, the Kuomintang, made another turn. Obviously in the right revolutionary direction, since they are once again a united front. In On Contradiction, this demagogic class collaborationist says benignly, "We Chinese often say, things opposed to each other complement each other." So permeated to the marrow of his bones is Mao of Confucianism, that it is doubtful he is even conscious that he is thereby perverting in toto the Hegelian Marxian theory of development through contradiction. Seen all its profundity for the first time by Lenin in 1915 as he reread and commented upon Hegel's Science of Logic, this development through contradiction, transformation into opposite, helped Lenin get to the root of the collapse of established Marxism, the Second International. Blind to the developing oppositions, contradictions and antagonisms, Mao on the other hand invented a truly original division in the concept of contradiction, which he called principal aspect of the contradiction. This division between the principal contradiction and the principal aspect of contradiction permits Mao to make as complete a hash of philosophy as he had previously made of history. Thus it turns out that under certain conditions, begin quote, even principal contradictions are relegated temporarily to a secondary or subordinate position, end quote, and because of, begin quote, unseen developments, end quote, and, begin quote, mutual transformations, end quote, the economic basis becomes subordinated, while, begin quote, political and cultural reforms become the principal and decisive factors, end quote. Trying to make up for this insipid subjectivism, Mao proceeds to tell his readers that communists of course remain materialists since, as a whole, they see that material things determine spiritual things. All one can say of such a hodgepodge is what Kant said of the cosmological proof, that it was, begin quote, a perfect nest of thoughtless contradictions, end quote. A recent traveller to China cited what a local party secretary from Shenxi said, begin quote, through the study of theory, I clearly understood the principles of uninterrupted revolution and revolution by stages, and put them into concrete application in pig breeding, end quote. Senseless as the local party's secretary's statement is, it is the only logical conclusion of the leader's reduction of theory to practice, compelling the Chinese to follow his dictum that dogmas are more useless than cow dung. Before, however, we flee in disgust from the vulgarities that pass for philosophy, and become too anxious to dismiss what totalitarian China lovingly calls Mao thought, let us bear in mind his present power. Let us remember also that when Mao made the Chinese Communist Party accept the united front of Chiang and initiated his 3/3 principle, that 1/3 Communist Party members, 1/3 Kuomintang, and 1/3 non-party people constitute the administration in communist areas, the fight against Japan stiffened. This was the period when visiting foreign journalists, whose cultural standards were greater than those of Mao's cohorts, were impressed with the exciting speeches and culture. Worried of the Kuomintang's corruption and its ineffectualness in fighting Japan, they were impressed by the communists, not only in fighting against Japan, but in their dedication to go to the people, i.e., to establish schools among the peasants in remote areas, and proceed with agricultural reforms. Still others, including many of the bourgeoisie and landlords, were attracted by the moderate agricultural program, and hence, many anti-communists began accepting the Chinese communists as mere agrarian reformers. Mao contributed nothing to Marxian philosophy, and denuded its politics of its class content, but he certainly carved out an original road to power.